We all know you win Pokemon battles by dealing damage, but what if you couldn't do that? No attacking moves, no indirect damage either, and not even things like Destiny Bond. Is that even possible? That's exactly what I try to find out in Pokémon Reborn, a fan game with a dark story and, more importantly for this challenge, a lot of difficult battles. This won't be fun for my opponents, most times not for me either, but hopefully it's at least somewhat enjoyable for you. Let's get started. Now that we've safely arrived in the peaceful Reborn City, it's time to make the difficult decision between 21 starter options. Although for this challenge it basically comes down to the choice of Chikorita for recovery with Synthesis or Mudkip for a ground type against the Electric Gym, which is up first. There would eventually be other options for recovery, so I decided to deal with the more immediate problem and take Mudkip. This could currently only spam Growl though, resulting in me losing the first two rival fights, so you might be wondering how I even win battles in this challenge. Well, every move has a certain amount of usages, called power points, and once the opponent has no moves left to use, it's forced to struggle with just 25% of their max HP and recoil. So if I can survive battles for long enough, that can be my ticket to victory. My Mudkip already has Growl to lower my opponent's attack stat, so I filled up the rest of the squad with some sand attack Pidgeys to drop accuracy. I also ended up throwing in 2 Grimer to take less damage by boosting their own stats with Harden instead of dropping the opponent's. So now I just had to spam status moves for long enough until my opponents ran out of power points and eventually went down to struggle. Just ignore the Bidoof and you'll be fine. Except for the fact that in Pokémon Reborn, trainers are smart. This game is already difficult because the opposing teams are well put together and other things I'll mention when they're relevant, but for now the issue is the opponent's decision making. Once I get off a couple stat drops, the AI decides to be rude and switch out. Besides Grimer, I don't have great options for boosting myself, so this is a big problem at the moment, so I'm just gonna ignore it. Instead, I found my way through the city while only battling trainers with a single Pokemon until I had better options. There was one battle with multiple foes that I did take on, but that was a double battle which upon victory gave me access to a free Pachirisu. For each game it's a coin flip upon generation for it to be that or a Zigzagoon, and this world champ will end up being a lifesaver. I still had no shot at beating the first mini boss battle against Scumbag Fern though, so I got 2 Poochyena and then had to grind. Catching Pokemon does give decent experience, but with limited money that wouldn't get me very far, so to avoid grinding against wild Pokemon for hours, I had to resort to something else. By complaining like a Karen, I could get a stupid employee to bring in the grinding trainers who he thought would be too strong for me, but little did he know I entered the Piñata password earlier so they would just straight up give me experience candies. I could now easily evolve my Pidgey and Poochyena, which together with things like Charm Pachirisu and Disable Grimer let me beat up Fern without any major issues. Now that he somewhat tolerates us, it's time to take on the evil team of this game which blew up the train at the start, Team Meteor. They are definitely a threat to the region, but not to me since I got my good old pal Fern to murder all their Pokemon while I'll just sit there as mental support. I'd love to go into more details of the raid, but I've talked for over 3 minutes and I'm not even at the first gym yet. And oh boy, is that one big stronghold. As I said, it's an electric gym, so Mudkip evolving into the part crowd Marshtomp is huge of course, but that wouldn't save me from Sonic Boom Voltorb. That move is so annoying in this challenge. It's a normal type move that always does the devastating 20 damage. Always, except against ghost types. By using the Mono Ghost cheat code, which is a bit questionable, but I'm using everything I can get, I could catch a Drifloon. By switching between that and an electric immunity, like also Voltobs or Pachirisu, the main reason this is a lifesaver, I could safely stall it out of PP until it struggled, or not. Introducing AI being rude, part 2, Electric Boogaloo. If a Pokemon is out of moves and will have to use Struggle, the opponent will most times just switch it out. To deal with this, I had to do something that stretches the boundaries of legality even more. I had to catch a Patrat and get it to level 36, but experience candies can't get you past the current level cap of 20. Technically I could sell them to buy Pokeballs and grind by catching wild Pokemon, but that would take ages, so instead I just cheated in some rare candies to do it instead. With this I got Petra to learn Mean Look and then evolve it into Watchog. Luckily I could get it back down to below the level cap with common candies so it would actually listen to me, letting me trap the Volt Orb and forcing them to struggle. But now it's time for the gym leader, Julia. She likes her explosions and we're definitely kicking off this gym challenge with a bang because look at that team. Work up, roll out, sonic boom, charge beam and of course, explosion. All of that spread out over 6 Pokemon. And also, she has a permanent field which is basically electric terrain. Fields are like terrains but completely busted and don't wear off. It didn't really matter though, because I could actually get rid of it with Mud Sport. This game actually has a usage for it, but electric moves aren't even the issue here since I just keep switching between immunities. If I didn't have those, Charge Beam would be a giant issue, so you can see why I picked Mudkip. Roll Out is the scary part here, doubling in power every turn. Intimidate and Sand Attack can kinda deal with it, but it's not very reliable and I'm taking a lot of damage with no options for recovery. After a bunch of attempts, I figured it was basically mandatory to get a good Pokemon with Protect, so I got Marshtomp to level 32 with rare candies for exactly that, leveled it down again with common candies, and then got a Meowth for another part of my plan, Pickup. With this I could get ore and berries for at least some sort of healing, so I gave the gym battle another shot. I now also got to use Roar my Tiana to prevent Oricorio's work up shenanigans, but even with Protect Marshtomp, 3 rollout users was enough to make it run out of PP, so I eventually just got overwhelmed again. Because of this, there was one last questionable thing I decided to do. Level up 5 Pickup Meowth to level 91. With these I managed to find 2 leftovers and a couple PP ups, somewhat solving both the recovery and running out of Protect issues. I used the remaining PP ups and Sand Attack, and these upgrades finally allowed me to beat Julia. Let's break it down. I of course broke the field at the start with Mud Sport, and then the switching started. I almost brought in my Diana once Oricorio came out to roar it back to its Pokeball while I tried to set up, and for the rest it was mostly switching between my normal and electric immunities. The first victim to actually go down was the Blizzle, against which I brought out Watchog while it was on its last legs, trapped it with Mean Luke, and voila, that's 1 Pokemon down after only 12 minutes. Oh boy. Julia threw the counterpart Minun to the dogs yet, although that phrasing doesn't really work since I didn't use Mariana against it, and instead took care of it in the same way as Blizzle in only 6 more minutes. The next 20 minutes was just a bunch of switching from both sides that I'll spare you, so let's cut to the scary moment of almost getting swept by Oricorio. It took down one of my Mariana, but Watchog surprisingly ended up being useful outside of trapping stuff, since Sand Attack and Detect allowed me to stall the bird out of its remaining Air Cutter PP, leaving only the normal type Pound for it to deal damage with, so Drifloon could stall it out, and this also let me heal up my other Mariana with leftovers. Voltorb exploded somewhere along the way, but I just spent way too long looking through this 56 minutes long battle without success, so I'll do that in editing. Oricorio eventually got struggle trapped, Alolan Geodude wasted its galvanized self-destruct on a Marshtomp switch, and Electrode finally struggled as well to get me my first badge. And there are 18 gyms in this game. Time to speed it up. I probably won't talk much about the story, I definitely won't discuss every battle, and if there are any optional boss fights I can skip, I'll 100% do that like the rifle fight in the Obsidian Slums. The battle should also speed up from here on out since I got access to a bunch of new tools, with the main one being Vespiquen since I can now evolve Combee within the level cap. I did then almost immediately use 4 rare candies to overlevel for heal order because of an upcoming fight, but at least this time I legally obtained them by buying them at a newly unlocked store. Together with a Black Sludge I got by catching Wild Grimer, this was finally enough to deal with a surprisingly difficult double battle against the Scraggy gang. Usually stuff like this isn't really noteworthy, but it does show the start of some of the longer lasting strats I'll use, and it also points out how awful double battles can be. My Grimer was now a quite formidable stall Pokemon with Acid Armor, Minimize and the aforementioned Black Sludge, and Vespiquen was a great wall as well with Defend Order, Heal Order and mainly Pressure, which makes the opponent use double their PP. The main issue in this fight was Swagger from the Scraggy, which kept confusing my Pokemon, so I had to switch quite often, but with 2 Vespiquen on the team and enough patience, I eventually got the dub. The next rifle fight introduced the issue of getting poisoned for constant chip damage, but I just paralyzed my Vespiquen beforehand to work around that and win the battle. There was then a battle against one of the Pulse Tangrowth from Team Meteor, basically a fancy Mega Evolution, but since it was the only opponent in this battle, I easily stalled it out. Time to get a bunch more upgrades before the next gym. That will be against the grass specialist Florinia, so I was incredibly happy when I saw the mystery egg in Obsidian Slums was a Bronzor. Her team revolves around spikes, sandstorm and nature power turning into sand tomb on her desert field, so a levitating steel type is amazing here. But not as good as the myth, the legend, Hoppip. Its evolved form Skiploom is amazing here, with the grass and flying typing to resist almost all moves on Florinia's team, be immune to spikes and sand tomb, and be unaffected by leech seed and powder moves. And the static Hoppip here all have a random egg move, so I got one with grassy terrain for team support alongside synthesis to heal itself. And that's not all, since in the training school there were move tutors for block, so I didn't have to rely on Watchhawk for trapping anymore, and Spite. This is the best move for this challenge, since it removes 4 PP of the opponent's last used attack, making Trubbish an actual beast. It could use Stockpile to get defense boost, Spite to drain the enemy's PP, and Swallow or Recycle or Unbury for recovery. I said I'd speed up, but man, there's just so much to talk about in this challenge, and although it might seem like suffering at some points, it turns the game into needing a completely unique strategic approach, and I love it. Anyways, let's go beat up Florinia. She led with Maractus to the set of spikes, but almost nothing on my team cared about that, because I of course built it around that. After 3 layers of spikes, she swapped in her Ferroseed, whose spin missile was a bit annoying since it was boosted on their desert field, but by temporarily overrunning it with grassy terrain, I managed to take it decently well and I didn't even need to trap it in for it to struggle itself to death. After some dancing around, Credili got sent out, which is quite scary for my flying types because of the super effective rock type smackdown, but that move was also her only way to hit Bronzor, and with a couple iron defenses I could successfully tank all of them, and I was number 2 down. With that out of the way, I could stall out the remaining Pokemon by switching between the Leech Seed and Powder Immune Skiploom and the tanky PP training Vespiquen for a relatively short and easy 40-minute gym fight. There are 6 major battles before the next badge, excluding the gym leader. For the sake of this video not being an hour long, I'll per battle just discuss the main strategy and for the rest only mention new interesting challenges that come up, but before I very quickly go over these 6, there were 2 important evolutions. Drifloon into Driflim and Bronzor into Bronzong, which now also learns Block. Really helpful, but before I got the second evolution, I had to take on another Pulse Tangrowth, now accompanied by a scary Chatot. It had Nasty Plot to boost its special attack, and Chatter has a strong special move that always confuses, and you'll see that boosting moves and special attacks would be the main issue this run, but luckily here there was only one move with 20 PP, so Spite My Diana made this fight somewhat doable. The third and final Pulse Tangrowth fight also had a Fire Spin Breaksin, which again required some decent luck together with Spite to quickly drain its PP, and stored power on the Tangrowth itself, which I lost to my first attempt, but on the following one I made sure to keep most of my team healthy, and by throwing everything I had at it, I could just barely squeeze out a victory. The Poison Gym Leader was up next, with a field that poisons your Pokemon every turn, so I mainly relied on my Poison and Steel types while having some paralyzed support Pokemon in the back, and altogether there wasn't much interesting to talk about here. Except for the fact that I didn't actually get a badge from this because the guy jumped off a bridge. Moving on. I then had to battle the 2 rivals Victoria and Fern back to back, but because Reborn has a quick save button, you can actually use that to save in cutscenes like in between the 2 fights, so after easily dealing with Victoria I could reset against Fern until I got the luck required with my minimized Drifloon to get a relatively easy victory. The next fight presented another big issue though, Stealth Rocks. We've seen entry hazards before with Florinia spikes, but there's nothing immune to Stealth Rocks, and preventing them from getting set up with Taunt and Spite just didn't work out because of Fire Spin here. This team also had a bunch of strong fire types with a Sunsetter, special attackers, and a Dragon Rage user. Fortunately, my luck with pre-generated random gift Pokemon continued and I got a Frillish which would learn Recover, Water Sport, Acid Armor, and Spite. Together with a Wild Barboach which I could evolve and teach Amnesia and Rest, I managed to stall out most of the fire types after I used Drifloon to take care of the things that could otherwise deal with my water types, and I could eventually get the dub. So even though I tried to minimally discuss all these battles, they together still took almost an entire page of the script. Well, at least I can finally challenge the actual 3rd gym leader, so let's see what this fight is all about. Oh, it's a double battle. This could have complicated a lot of things if I didn't get incredibly lucky yet again with a 25% chance Nincada egg. This could evolve into the amazing Shedinja, which because of its ability Wonder Guard only takes direct damage from super effective attacks. These were far and few between across Shelly's bug types, so I bred for a second Nincada and taught the 2 Shedinja both Spite and Protect. With this, the fight basically came down to getting rid of the moves that could harm Shedinja with Spite or Pressure Stalling, and then just using my half-dead bugs to stall out the remaining moves. That's enough details for that fight, and at this point most battles are somewhat trivial with a couple tries because I have some pretty decent tools, but some more upgrades wouldn't hurt. So after a simple win against Kane, I managed to evolve Trubbish into Garbodor, and then after another battle against a character I won't explain where Shedinja really thrived, I got access to a static Happiny. Oval stones can be found by mining, so that let me evolve into Chansey, and the power of friendship got it to its final stage, Blissey. Its moveset was Soft Boiled, Charm, Minimize and Block, making it a fantastic special ball, but Block wouldn't help a lot against the next gym leader, Shade, the Ghost type specialist. The issue here is that Ghost types can't be trapped, so I needed another way to get them to struggle. Even before that, BP stalling seemed like a pretty difficult job with multiple Pokemon running Swords Dance to get +2 attack, but Vespin really pulled through here, and even Blissey managed to hold its own against some of the physical attackers. For some of them, like Mimikyu, I could also swap between my Ghost Immune Blissey and my Wonder Guard Shedinja to PP style that, so now I just had to come up with a way to make them struggle. What I figured out is that the AI will see a kill or struggle against my 1 HP Shedinja, so if I just keep bringing that in, call it back so it doesn't actually die to struggle, and swap back into it while Shade also switches, I could eventually bait enough struggles for all Pokemon to go down, so I got the 4th badge. Time for a bunch more story stuff, me getting a Ditto which doesn't really matter, another relatively easy pulse fight, and then me getting yet another step closer to fully trivializing this challenge by catching Pyukumuku. The main reason why this is so helpful is Unaware. This ignores any opposing stat changes, so it can handle setup mons quite well. Alongside that, it has Recover, Spite, Block and Recycle, which I could use with a Leppa Berry I found way back in Obsidia Park to infinitely regain PP. Before this, I most times had a limited amount of Spites or Recovery, but not anymore. Together with a neat little red card strategy to force out Victoria's Incineroar, whose single use the Lyric Seed makes it always crit, so then later it wouldn't do that anymore, I could get another victory and move on to the former fighting gym leader, Kiki. This battle actually introduces the first time I kill something without them struggling. Instead, I baited High Jump Kick from Hitmonlee twice while switching into Shedinja, doing 50% recoil each time. I just want to take this moment to clarify some things about the rules for the people who didn't check the description, and if I already read a long comments lecturing me on all the ways I could have possibly cheesed the challenge, I can't do anything that inherently does damage. No Flame Body, no Destiny Bond, no Trick Life Orb, no magic bouncing entry hazards. I can keep going, but just whatever you think of probably isn't allowed to make it more interesting. There's one questionable strategy that I'll discuss later, but for now let's get back to Kiki. That Hitmonlee wasn't an issue, but 4 of her Pokemon have Meditate, which grants +3 attack on her field. Even Mimikyu couldn't handle all of this, so I had to rely on Shedinja switching for a decent portion of the battle. It took a couple hours of resetting for decent luck, but besides one more red card, there wasn't much more interesting to talk about, so whoa, look at that, I beat Kiki. Unfortunately, this didn't get me another badge since she was retired, and even if she weren't, later on she got, spoiler alert, murdered by the evil team's leader Garchomp, but I'm skipping ahead a bit. I first had to take a detour to the amazing Azuran Island, which is actually a disgusting swampy mess. Yay. And the battles here weren't especially paradise either. Battle numero uno was against Meteor Private duo Astra and Eclipse in a multi-battle. The Kiki fight may have taken a while, but this battle was way worse. There was a Fire Spin Soul Rock, Psywave for set damage on multiple Pokemon, setup moves like Bulk Up and Swords Dance, and then an Instruct or Guru to make the scary mons even scarier. My main strategy for this fight revolved around Minimize Blissey with Recycle Leppa Berry for infinite PP, Soft Boiled for recovery, and Charm for lowering the opposing attack stats. Ignoring the luck needed for the setup, it was pretty effective, except for against a Lycanroc Midnight with no guard, letting it always land its attacks, which all did quite some damage to my physically frail Blissey. This was the cause of most of my losses here, but eventually I managed to successfully support my Staller with Intimidate Spite Mariana to guide it to victory. After that, it was time for the second and last fight on Glorious Island, and this is one of my favorite battles of the run because of one single strategy. The lead Klefki would set up spikes, so I had to rely on flying types for most of the battle, which was fine, except for against the nasty plot Chatot. Remember it from earlier? This time it doesn't just have Chatter, it also has Heat Wave. No types are immune to these moves, Wonder Guard wouldn't help me here either, and even Blissey would get overwhelmed by +6 Chatters combined with Confusion, so what did I do? Well, no types are immune to Chatter and Heatwave, but there are abilities that can help me out for both of those. I could get an Electrode with Soundproof to not take damage from sound moves like Chatter, and an Arcanine with Flashfire for fire type attacks. But if I kept switching between these two grounded Pokemon, wouldn't they just die to spikes? Yes, but to fix that I bought 2 air balloons, gave them to both of the previously mentioned Pokemon, and now they are immune to the grounded entry hazards, letting me stall out the Chatot. And stuff like this is exactly why I love challenge runs like these. Now it's time to finally talk about Kiki's murder, and with that I mean just discussing the fight against Solaris' level 75 guard jump. For this I changed Arcanine's ability to Intimidate, gave a bunch of Pokemon Protect, and just threw my entire team at it until it went down to struggle. It really wasn't that hard. Since I like that swamp so much, the game then sent me to the garbage-filled wasteland. Speaking of garbage, the Meteor admin Ace isn't, but their team was pretty easy to deal with, and Fern is in fact garbage, and he wasn't much of an issue either. So with that out of the way, it's time for another tricky gym battle because it's in doubles, and there is also some chaotic field effect that spits out entry hazards at the end of each turn with a buffed effect, like Stealth Rock doing double the normal damage. Combine this with my Pokemon most likely getting poisoned at some point in the fight, I needed to develop a new strategy for this. I thought Magikarp Reuniclus would be the solution, but this didn't even end up making the final team, although it did also catch a Wooper and bred it to get the Egg moves Recover and Stockpile, making for another good defensive one with Unaware. After a couple failed attempts, I replaced that Reuniclus with Heal Pulse Blissey as support, but I still didn't even get close, so it was time to bust out the big guns, EV training. By beating a Pokemon, you don't just get experience, you also get effort values for a certain stat, and every Pokemon can have a total of 512 of those with 255 per stat. After I EV trained all of my Pokemon in HP, they had gotten roughly 30 extra hit points each, which can definitely make a significant difference. I had one more trick up my sleeve, and some of you might not agree with it. I taught Pyukumuku Soak. The move itself is fine, it just changes the opponent to a water type, which can be useful by removing their same type attack bonus, but in this battle it had 2 more purposes. Aya likes to use Sludge Wave, which hits all the other Pokemon on the field, so by using Soak to remove their poison typings, her own Pokemon would take a lot more damage from this as well. Still, that's not the questionable part. That is Black Sludge. This item acts like leftovers for poison types, recovering 1/16 of their max HP every turn, but for other Pokemon it does the exact opposite. So by using Soak, I can make it so half of Aya's team would slowly go down to their own health items. It's a cool strategy that was very effective and got me through the battle decently quickly, while it would have been a huge pain otherwise, but it still might be seen as like tricking a Black Sludge onto a non-poison type. This is definitely a bit of grey area, but how I see it is that the effect of the move doesn't inherently cause damage, only in this very specific scenario, so because of that it is allowed. If you disagree, that's fine, but if you want to send hate comments, just send a video of you beating this battle without it first. Anyways, after Soak led all of Aya's Mount to their own demise, I had 5 badges out of... Did I ever mention this game as 18 gyms? Oh, I did. Well, I thought it would be funny to reveal it here, but joke wasted. Anyways, at this point the challenge was getting a lot more boring since it had become mostly trivial for single battles, so I decided to get through 2 more battles, which got me to the point in the story where you finally escape from Reborn City, and this was a good point for me to take a break. It would take me exactly half a year to return to this challenge, but with some new inspiration. I could slowly trudge through all the remaining 13 gyms, but that wouldn't be fun for anyone involved, so instead I wanted to wrap up this challenge by taking on the 3 major gauntlets of the game. Fiori Gauntlet, Glass Gauntlet, and of course the Pokémon League. If there would be anything impossible in this challenge, it would be one of these 3 gauntlets, so let's have a look. The first one, a raid of Team Meteor on the Fiori Mansion, is definitely the easiest of the 3 simply because it's all multi-battles. I went a bit more crazy with the team here because for these last parts I'm just cheating them in to save time, but I did of course make sure everything about them would be possible to get. My fancy strats included Dual Screens Meowstic, a support Comfey with Floral Healing and Grassy Terrain for recovery, Trick Room for speed control and helping out for damage support, and in that trend I also had a very funky Arcanine with Safeguard and Swagger to boost my partner's attack by 2 stages. Did all of this pay off? Not really. There were a total of 32 opposing Pokemon across 3 battles without my Pokemon getting revived in between, so Pokemon that solely provided support and didn't stay alive for long weren't of that much help for me. Instead, I ended up relying on a single Pokemon for the first 2 battles, Clefable. Cosmic Power and Minimize gave me an insane defensive setup, allowing me to spam Follow Me for the rest of the battle, meaning all opposing attacks would target my Clefable, which would dodge most of them, and easily tank the ones that did land. Florinia's grass types were surprisingly good offensively, and these two battles with her weren't much of an issue. Oh wait, Clefable died. It didn't take long though until it was a 2v1 and my ragtag team of support Pokemon were enough to finish the job. The final fight with Julia against the Team Meteor leader Solaris and the random grunt was now a lot scarier without Clefable, but Intimidate Arcanine and Regenerator Spore Amoonguss were good enough support for quite a bit since the random grunt Whiscash just kept being an idiot. Trick Room Comfey also was actually helpful at one point to help me take down a roost spamming Mandibuzz, so we take those. Shortly after that, Julia's Oricorio took down Solaris' last Pokemon Garchomp, who was as much of an issue as in the 1v6, and this fight was now a 2v1. One small catch, Orderly John still had 4 Pokemon left while Julia had 1. Luckily this is where my support Pokemon could really shine, so he still managed to get the dub. Next up in this boss rush is the Glass Gauntlet. So what do we have here? First we got a 6v12 multi-battle against Shelly and Kane, who are controlled by Pulse Hypno. Then after getting hypnotized ourselves, we have a 6v6 single battle with a completely healed up team against Luna, and finally after only a partial heal, another 6v12 multi-battle against Sarah and Radamus. Yep, I have never talked about those last 3 before because they're mid-game gym leaders. Anyways, the important and difficult part here is that I'm on my own. Clefable will still be an integral part of my strategy, but I need Recycle Lepaberry on it to not run out of PP, so I need another Pokemon that can actually take hits since now I'm missing Follow Me. For the rest of the team, I had Intimidate Arcanine, the classic Pyukumuku set, a Violite Restalk Spite Dusclops, Support Blissey, and Contrary Shell Smash Guard Split Shuckle. Yeah, we've entered the part in the video where I'm not explaining everything in detail anymore since there are just a lot of new stuff. Turns out Arcanine was pretty awful, so I ended up replacing it with Alolan Muk as the second invincible starter. Turns out Alolan Muk was also complete dogshit, even more than the actual dog itself, so I ended up replacing that with Drifblim. This is the perfect setup Pokemon with Stockpile and Minimize to get similar boosts to Clefable, but the difference is that Drifblim can use Baton Pass and give those buffs to a Pokemon in the back, which still has 4 free move slots. And in this case, that is Pyukumuku. While Clefable just sits there and stays alive, Pyukumuku definitely stays alive, but also more importantly can spam a Spite as well to drastically speed up these battles. This duo easily took care of the first fight, so it's on to battle numero 2. This was a mostly trivial single battle, but there was one issue, the Mega Absol. This was actually 2 issues in one. Because of Magic Bounce I can't trap it with Block, and Luna also had a Ghost Type on her team, so that makes 2 untrappable Pokemon. For some reason though, she used Struggle with her Absol against Drifblim. I have no clue why, but this let me win first try, so I'll take it. I said there were 2 issues though, and the second one is Knockoff. I may have made it to the last fight, but because you only get a partial heal here, you don't get back knocked off items, including a very crucial Lepaberry. Or do you? Hi, yes, it's editing me, here to correct something I missed while writing the script, since I only just noticed that I did get the Lepaberry back, but it just activated right at the start of the battle, so I could have simply used Recycle, but I missed it while playing as well. Either way, this wasn't a huge deal, I just redid the fight and used Shuckle to deal with Mega Absol instead, so no important items got knocked off at all, and it was now actually time to take on the final fight of this gauntlet. The strategy was the same as for the first 6v12, but the setup was a lot harder. Blizzard ignoring Invasion and Hail was quite annoying while trying to set up Minimize with Clefable, and I especially had to get lucky with Drifblim to survive enough turns for setting up the perfect Baton Pass into Pyukumuku. It may have required a decent amount of evasion luck, but I'm the guy who spent 27 hours on a rematch champion fight in Insurgents with only a double team Mega Eevee and a Dream, so this was nothing compared to that, and after a measly 18 minutes I was ready to spam Spite and Recycle over and over again. 24 minutes later and all 12 foes had finally died to struggle, so that's the second gauntlet done as well. So now it's time for the final frontier, the Pokémon League. I decided to go in with the same mistakes that got me through the Glass Gauntlet, because in the end I mainly just had to rely on Clefable or the Drifloon Pyukumuku combo, and the rest was kinda just filler. I spent a bit too much time here trying to go with the interesting strategy of using different Pokemon in the opening battle, with first Blissey to make Chromate kills have a Brave Bird really cool damage, then Shell Smash Contrary Shuckle to just barely survive Archeops' hits and stall down until it only had Earthquake and Tailwind left, so I could then set up with Drifblim, then go to Pyukumuku. This still wasn't enough though, since on the sky field, Gengar's Thunder ignored the accuracy check and just did over half my HP. To deal with that, I changed Pyukumuku from physically defensive to specially defensive and just tried to set up with Drifblim as a Crobat from the get-go. I had a free turn to click minimize while Crobat used Tailwind, so I didn't even need that much luck to fully prepare Pyukumuku. Now I just had to dodge enough Thunder crits while spamming Recover and the occasional Spite until Gengar was out of them, and the battle was basically won. Even a paralysis couldn't stop me, so that's 1 out of the 6 battles done. But then I got back into double battle hell, and this is easily the worst one yet because of the Flower Garden. This field is straight up demonic. It has 5 stages where things like Growth or the use item Synthetic Seed make it grow a stage, while Growth is also the move called by Nature Power and now boosts both attack and special attack by 3 stages. If that wasn't already enough, the damage of Bug and Grass moves is doubled at higher stages, and most importantly, the Synthetic Seed additionally makes the holder use Ingrain for passive recovery, which at stage 5 is 1/4 of their HP every turn, so even if I manage to get them to struggle, they just immediately recover any lost HP. This battle took a lot of trial and error to figure out. I knew I wanted Unaware Clefable on one side, but I wasn't sure about the other. I tried using Dusclops, Shuckle, and Blissey, but none of those worked out, and because of Bannett's lead Thunder Galvantula with Rain active at the start of the fight, Drifblim wasn't easy to set up with either. Still, I didn't really have any other options, so I somehow had to figure out how to pull it off. Luckily, I had a couple tricks in my bag. A Synthetic Seed of my own and a TM for Sunny Day. The seed would activate immediately at the start of the battle, giving Drifblim a special defense boost to take hits better and Ingrain for passive recovery, and also activating its Unburden ability, which doubles your speed when you lose a health item. This lets me outspeed both opponents, basically giving Drifblim an extra turn, and I use this to set up Sunny Day to combine with the already existing Rain into a Rainbow Field. This doubles the effect of Clefable's Cosmic Power, and since the Rain is now gone, I can use Minimize with Drifblim to dodge opposing Thunders and Hurricanes. The Flower Garden does eventually come back when the Harsh Sunlight fades, but only as stage 1, meaning that Ingrain only heals the normal 1/16 instead of a quarter. I then Baton Pass the necessary boosts and the Ingrain for additional recovery from Drifblim to Pyukumuku and PP salt both opponents, which is also quite annoying because I can't Spite Nature Power, and at the final stage of Flower Garden, this becomes Petal Blizzard instead of Growth, but I'll spare you all the times where I lost because they landed a single crit. What was I talking about again? Oh yeah, I PP salt both opponents, and once I started struggling, I can switch into Blissey to use Rain Dance, and then to Shuckle to set up the Rainbow Field again with Sunny Day, so they slowly struggle themselves to death. Their Ingrain is also really annoying here since it means they can't switch, so I can't just sit here with Clefable and Pyukumuku until the entire enemy's team is out of PP, but instead I gotta set up Rainbow Field for every mon individually, quickly set up Clefable again, I just hope that everything will be alright, but eventually after attempting this fight for 5.5 hours, I finally beat it. Third up was another battle that was a bit tricky to figure out since my Pokemon just kept getting one-shot by things like 2.25 times boosted Judgment and stuff like that, but I'll save you the trial and error part and just show you how I ended up winning. Clefable could really easily set up here since this Holy Field also doubled Cosmic Power's effects, so this let me just stall out Noivern's Boom Burst until it swapped into Ditto, which of course couldn't do anything, so after clicking one move it immediately got switched out again for Dragonite. I could simply keep spamming Recovery while it slowly wasted all of its extreme speeds, although it did take quite some time since he kept alternating between Ditto and Dragonite. Once it was out of extreme speeds, which otherwise would have done super effective damage against my Drifblim because of the field, I switched that in on the turn my opponent would bring in Ditto, and I had actually taught Drifblim an attacking move here so that the Ditto would hopefully lock itself into using that. Unfortunately, it just used Stockpile and switched out afterwards, so I only got 2 free turns to set up Stockpile myself, which wouldn't be enough to take a super effective field boosted Judgment, but that's why we got Minimize. One more Stockpile let me barely take a hit, and I managed to dodge all the other ones, so now it's time to Baton Pass into Pyukumuku and just spite myself through the rest of this battle. For the last Elite 4 member, it wasn't even much of a question when I should set up. Despite Anna's lead being an Ice type alone in Ninetales, it wastes its first turn with Auroraville, giving me a free Stockpile, and at that point Drifblim already takes Aurora Beams well enough that with leftovers Protect for recovery, it can easily set up Stockpiles and Minimizes, Baton Pass damage to Pyukumuku, and this had no issues with stalling out the rest of the fight. Yes, I had a couple attempts before I figured out the leftovers Protect strat, but I did get a first try victory in the penultimate battle of the run. You'd expect to battle the champion right now, but I didn't cover the points where she got eaten by Hydreigon. So instead we gotta battle the team meteor leader Lyn, not so hilarious because he also got killed by her. If you wanna know the full story and don't mind the thickest Dutch accent ever, I'll link the playlist of my unlisted randomizer shiny log in the description. Anyways, Lyn led with an Alolan Ninetales as well, which may or may not be stolen from the previous champion, but she should have joined the better lead Pokemon since I just stalled out of Moonblast and Freeze Dry with Clefable, then set up with Driftlane against it, and guess what? Used Pyukumuku to spite all the other Pokemon. Unfortunately, Lyn is a sore loser and decided to yeet me into another dimension or something where I'd have to fight her again with God on her side. It was finally time for the rematch against that moody Bidoof from the start. No, I mean she literally had Arceus. Pulse Arceus even. But first, let's worry about how to set up Driftlane here. It wouldn't work against her lead Mismagius since it would just destroy me with Life Orb Shadow Balls, but I could use that first part against her. We were yet again battling on a field where Cosmic Power gave +2 defenses, so setting up with Clefable was no issue here, and even though Life Orb boosted Mismagius' attacks, it also did 10% recoil every turn, so it eventually took itself down. This brought out Lyn's own Clefable, and although at first I thought this would be set up fodder for Driftlane, I forgot that its Unaware also ignores my stat increases, so a field boosted Moonblast that ignored my defense and evasion boosts kinda threw a wrench in my plans, and I had to come up with something else. I decided to sacrifice Dusclops against Clefable to spite away a couple of Moonblasts before stalling out the remaining ones with Blissey, and once it was also out of Fire Blast, I gave the Driftlane setup another go. I had also given it a Magical Seed, which gives it an Omni boost on its field in return for having to recharge for a turn, but when you switch it in, that doesn't matter, and I could immediately move on to get even more boosts while Clefable had no attack moves left, letting me successfully prepare Pyukumuku for one final stallfest. Honchkrow came close to killing it a couple times, first with a field boosted C move and then with a high crit ratio Night Slash, but Pyukumuku managed to hang on for long enough. Unfortunately, I didn't block in Hydreigon before it switched out because of Draco Meteor drops, so that brought out Celestina, which managed to lead cheat me for overtime damage and more importantly, recovery for my opponent. So when both Hydreigon and Celestina were out of PP, I quickly swapped out to get rid of lead cheat and then set up again with Driftlane, and after the two aforementioned Pokemon struggled themselves to death, it was time to face Pulse Arceus. It's pretty strong, but nothing that Pyukumuku can't handle. After I had stalled the enemy out of all their BP with Recover and Spite, I switched in Clefable to make their struggles always hit me, speeding up the process, but then immediately swapped back to Pyukumuku because it truly deserved to finish this off. This tiny hero single-handedly took down many foes, including even God, and now that it helped me take down Team Meteor and become the champion of the Reborn region, there was only one thing left to do. Get revenge on that stupid Bidoof. Thanks for watching. It's finally over. This project took a lot of time to finish, considering the length and amount of battles in the challenge, and that this is my longest scripted video yet. Still, I don't regret it at all. After a small detour to some more random stuff, I'm slowly going back to more original, insane playthrough challenge videos, which is truly my passion. Even though this run did get boring after a bit, I still enjoyed it majority of the time, and I just adjusted accordingly by taking a break after Gym 5 and then finishing up with the 3 main gauntlets. If you're still here and are somehow not subscribed yet, what are you doing? You clearly enjoy my suffering and will enjoy future videos. That's all I have for now, so I'll see you next time, and of course, stay alive.